Hello everyone, and welcome back to the AniMonolith recap series for Tensei Slime. Picking up where we left off, we now move on to the reports from Geld and Adelman. First of all, Rimuru thanked Geld for risking his life to defend the town. However, he also reminded him not to overwork himself. If Geld kept pushing too hard, his subordinates wouldn't be able to rest either, and that would weaken Tempest's entire defense system. Geld, deeply devoted to his home, vowed to continue protecting it, admitting that without his evolution, he likely would have been crushed by the enemy. From Ramirez's explanation, an even greater secret came to light. The attackers who appeared in the labyrinth were none other than the primordial angels, the 7 most powerful seraphim who once served directly under Veldanava. Long ago, they worked under Feldway to maintain the stability of the world, but over time, they changed drastically. Dino, Pico, and Gracia remained in the world, transforming into fallen angels. Feldway took Konu, Zelario, and Opera to another world, where they mutated into phantoms. Reviewing the battles inside the labyrinth showed just how terrifying their power really was. Pico fought evenly with Kumara, Gracia nearly overwhelmed Geld, and Zelario completely dominated both Charius and Trainee until Adelman arrived. Pico and Gracia could fight while simultaneously manipulating the labyrinth's gate, a sign of their overwhelming strength. Even Zelario, without going all out, had already put Tinya and Charius at a major disadvantage. With all the gathered intel, Rimuru finally declared his conclusion. Feldway and Michael are now official enemies of Tempest. Everyone is to remain vigilant against them. As for Dino, Rimuru admitted he still believed there was a chance he wasn't acting of his own free will. If Dino really was under Michael's control, then he didn't deserve to be judged as a true traitor. Rimuru ended with a message to Ramirez. If that's the case, let's forgive him. Hearing this, Ramirez smiled, visibly more at ease than before. And just like that, the debriefing wrapped up, and Rimuru could finally relax. The preparations were complete, the city was safe, and now it was time for everyone to enjoy a well-deserved grand banquet. Of course, some people still hadn't shaken off their battlefield energy. Take Benimaru, for example. Our guy confidently declared that he'd crush the so-called 3 Phantom Commanders in their next encounter. Gotta admire the confidence, Benny. Rimuru, though, couldn't help but notice that Benimaru, and even Gabiru, seemed different. Not just stronger, but sharper somehow, like their growth in battle had triggered something deeper. Gabiru, never one to miss a chance to show off, proudly boasted about his newfound strength, earning cheers and admiration from his men. Suka, however, immediately scolded him for being reckless, since, let's face it, he really did almost die back there. Typical Gabiru, but today he was forgiven. Meanwhile, Veldora was busy teasing Charius, mocking him for losing his fight. "No excuses, admit defeat like a man," he roared. But Rimuru couldn't resist pointing out the obvious. Wasn't Veldora himself the one who got flattened by Velgrind? Of course, Veldora denied it, claiming he was merely in bad shape. Naturally, Ramirez and Charius backed him up, insisting that outside interference made it unfair. Rimuru just rolled his eyes. There was no winning this argument. The banquet atmosphere only got livelier. Drinks flowed, and before long, Diablo and Xion were fighting over who had the honor of pouring Rimuru's glass. Honestly, those two compete over the strangest things. Rimuru urged them to stop arguing and just enjoy themselves, which led to Diablo smugly sipping wine. Red wine really does suit him. Xion, on the other hand, well, everyone knew her drinking habits were a disaster waiting to happen. Whenever she got drunk, chaos followed, and the worst part was, she never remembered it afterward. Better keep her on grape juice. Still, as Rimuru quietly watched his subordinates laugh, drink, and celebrate, he realized something important. They weren't just getting stronger, they were evolving in ways even he couldn't fully grasp. It wasn't only awakening, there was something hidden beneath it all. When Rimuru began to wonder if Ciel had secretly been influencing their growth, she immediately snapped back in his mind. "Please stop doubting me." All right, you're always right," Rimuru admitted. "I only gave them a little help," she added. Which, of course, meant she had helped. Rimuru decided not to press further, at least for now. This was a night for celebration, not interrogation. With that, he pushed his worries aside, determined to enjoy the banquet to the fullest. The next day, Rimuru decided to give his executives a short vacation. Well, vacation in name only. In reality, guys like Rigurd were still running around handling government work, checking the city's condition, reassuring the people, and making sure basic systems like plumbing were safe after the evacuation. Rimuru couldn't help but think, Running a country is seriously exhausting. It almost feels like being a servant to the people. Luckily, Testarossa and the others had been helping, which made things a little easier, but still, qualified staff were in short supply. As for Rimuru himself, he joked that he was just an amateur, mostly reading documents and stamping approvals. If something looked off, he'd reject it or send it back. Honestly, if not for Ashill's support, the whole administration would have collapsed long ago. Still, before diving back into work, Rimuru decided to stop by and visit Chloe. When he entered, Chloe greeted him nervously with a "Rimuru-sensei." He laughed and told her not to force herself to act like an adult, because to him, Chloe was still just Chloe. Blushing, she insisted that despite appearances, she was already an adult, even older than Rimuru. Her red cheeks and embarrassed pout only made her look more like a flustered girl, and Rimuru reassured her that he was just glad she was safe. Chloe, completely overwhelmed, buried her face in a pillow and muttered that he was being unfair. Rimuru had no idea what she meant, and even Ciel couldn't figure it out, so he just let it slide. Once she calmed down, Chloe explained her current condition. She was fine physically, but she could no longer communicate with Chronoa. The ultimate skill Hope King Sariel was on the verge of going out of control, so Chronoa was suppressing it. As a result, Chloe couldn't use her own space-time king Yog-Sothoth anymore. Basically, Michael's influence was still messing with her. Ciel quietly noted that she could step in. By entering Chloe's spiritual world and altering her skills, it might be possible to remove Michael's interference. But when Rimuru offered, Chloe refused. She explained that in Chronoa's final words she had said, "If we keep relying on Rimuru, we'll never be able to stand on our own. We need to overcome this with our own strength, if we want to walk beside him." Chloe agreed with that sentiment. Looking him straight in the eye, her determination was clear, far more mature than her outward appearance suggested. For a moment, Rimuru's heart wavered at her adult-like beauty, but he quickly shook it off. He reminded himself, "Nope, I'm not a Lolican. Don't even go there." Instead, he gently patted her head and told her that if she ever needed him, he'd always be there. Chloe smiled softly and nodded. After visiting Chloe, Rimuru barely made it back before Vesta rushed in, sweating nervously. The message? King Gazelle wanted an explanation about recent events. Well, of course. After a massive war, Rimuru had left the battlefield cleanup hanging and returned home. It wasn't hard to guess Gazelle was less than happy. Rimuru sighed and simply told Vesta to reply that he would give a proper explanation in a few days. After all, he needed time to organize everything before facing the king's questions. With that settled, it was time for lunch. Fried chicken and yakisoba noodles hit the spot, and just when Rimuru thought he could relax, a memory surfaced. Ciel had mentioned giving the executives a little help during the battle. Suspicious, Rimuru decided to confirm just how little this help actually was. As expected, Ciel's idea of a little turned out to be enormous. First, it had secretly modified Rimuru's skills without permission, and created a brand new ultimate skill, Harvest King Shub Niggurath. At the time, Rimuru hadn't paid much attention, too focused on Velgrind, but now he listened to the full explanation. The skill was essentially the crystallization of his bond with his subordinates, granting 4 terrifying abilities: skill creation, generate new skills from information gathered via food chain and analysis, skill duplication, copy an ability Rimuru has acquired, skill gifting, bestow a duplicated skill to someone else and revoke it later if needed, skill storage, convert skills into data, then restore them instantly whenever necessary. Rimuru realized the issue. The soul had limited capacity for holding skills. He already had 4 ultimate skills, so he assumed his storage was maxed out. But Ciel corrected him. It wasn't 4, it was 5. Thanks to analyzing Velgrind, Rimuru had unknowingly acquired the Scorch King Velgrind as well. No wonder Ciel had optimized everything. Rimuru's system was overloaded. Harvest King wasn't just a storage solution. It also allowed Rimuru to empower his subordinates through the Soul Corridor. Depending on the situation, Ciel had either boosted their skills slightly or granted massive temporary blessings. Honestly, without this intervention, many of them might have fallen in battle. Rimuru could only sigh and admit he owed Ciel thanks. Ciel, of course, brushed it off. "I only did what my master wished." Rimuru wasn't entirely sure if skill hoarding was just Ciel's hobby at this point. But one thing was certain, with enemies like Michael and Feldway ahead, this extra strength was nothing short of essential. While sorting through his thoughts, Rimuru was suddenly interrupted by Ciel, who casually asked if he wanted to resume the skill alteration process. Apparently, Ciel had been waiting for this chance, and now that the war was over, it was eager to get back to work. Rimuru vaguely remembered that Ciel once mentioned merging Storm King Veldora and Covenant King Uriel into something called Stellar Wind King Hastur. But since Uriel had been given to Velgrin, that plan was outdated. So now Ciel must have come up with a brand new and probably terrifying modification. Curious, Rimuru took stock of his current arsenal. By this point, he had 5 ultimate skills. Wisdom King Raphael, now merged into Ciel, Gluttonous King Beelzebub, Storm King Veldora, Scorch King Velgrind, and Harvest King Shub Niggurath. And if you counted the successfully analyzed Charity King Ragel, which was integrated when Velgrind evolved, then technically he was sitting on the equivalent of 6 ultimate skills. Not to mention, all the feedback power gained through Food Chain when his executives awakened had made things even messier. In other words, he was overloaded. And when too many skills pile up, it's actually smarter to merge and refine them into something stronger rather than hoard them all. Rimuru thought that maybe combining Beelzebub and Velgrind could create something terrifyingly efficient. He also wondered, not without worry, what exactly had happened to Wisdom King Raphael after Ciel took over. Still, there was no battle going on, so why not let Ciel handle optimization? Alright, I'll leave it to you. Understood. Implementation begins immediately. Too late. Before Rimuru could take back his words, Ciel had already started. And that's when the regret set in. Every time, it was always the same. He granted permission too easily, then panicked after realizing he hadn't even asked what kind of monster of a skill seal was about to forge. But Ciel had prepared for this exact scenario. It blitzed the process at lightning speed, humming happily while feigning deafness to Rimuru's desperate attempts to cancel. It was a one-way track now. Rimuru could only watch, resigned to whatever horror would come out at the end. And so, while Ciel buried itself in its latest remodeling project, Rimuru quietly abandoned his paperwork and decided to check in on his subordinates instead. He figured asking them about their skills was at least something he could control. But little did he know, a whole string of surprises was waiting for him there too. And that, my friends, marks the end of Recap. Thanks for watching and see you next time on AniMonolith.